forest bathing. It's either that or the morning meditation.
One.
It's meditation. I was like, it's either meditation or forest bathing. Meditation will be in the library, but the forest bathing, I think, will be sometime this week. That's one where you actually end up in here again. And the Reiki in the Redwoods too. That one's a really cool program. It's kind of like this really cool spiritual journey, and one of our facilitators is really well versed in Reiki. So definitely a neat opportunity to kind of embrace yourself in this really cool formation that happens in the forest. So we call it the Circle of Life, but this is actually called a fairy ring, and you can find them throughout this forest all over the place. This happens a few different ways. A more natural way is if a very large redwood tree here in the center fell over and like slid down the hill, removing all of its roots in the below it. Or more likely, our forest here in the 1800s was logged, so they took the biggest redwoods they could find, which is called selective logging. So if we were clear cut, we probably wouldn't have any redwoods, but fortunately it wasn't, and it was just selective. So they took those large redwood trees out, which also removed those roots, but it left behind basically an O-shaped root system underneath. And that's how you get all these ones growing in a circle. They just grow straight out of the roots. The roots, because they get ripped up, is because they're very shallow. These trees only root into the ground 3 feet, and their range and radius is, I think, like 50 feet. So they grasp onto each other, they really intertwine under the surface, but truly they're very, very shallow. And this is the largest tree in the world, only rooting 3 feet into the earth. And I just love this like cool little spot here. And then they kind of cleared it out, but usually you'll see around the redwoods these really tiny pine cones, and they're kind of hard to see. There you go. They're very small, so you may start to see them now that you can see the shape and size of them. Maybe about an inch, maybe 2 centimeters, I have no idea. This is what can grow a 400-foot tree. Crazy. This is the tallest tree in the world, coming out of probably the smallest pine cone. I don't know in the world, but to its size and ratio, it is. And what's wild about these pine cones is you probably won't see any of the seeds get germinated anymore, because they actually need fire to start its germination process. So a redwood forest really needs like that wildfire, but unfortunately and fortunately, we do suppress fires. There's a lot of people that live in the forest, so a lot of the times you won't see the little babies coming out of those seeds that are in the pine cones, but we do see a lot of babies. So all these little ones that are around us here, these are all baby redwood trees. And you kind of see there's like a little bit of char on some of these trees here. This has been from decades and decades ago. Nothing recent. We haven't had a recent fire here in a while. Knock on wood. We're past our fire season. It's been really wet this year. But these babies actually do the same exact thing that the ones that are around this circle do, and they just come out of the roots too. So you won't even be able to pull them out or anything. And if you look close enough, you'll see a part where it turns from like this brown trunk to this like neon green stem. And right where that stops, that's all this year's growth. So that's all the growth that we got this year. And then it'll get cold and they'll start to get that bark, and then during the spring they'll sprout again. But they grow very fast vertically. In width, they don't so much. A lot of those trees that you do see that are really wide at the base, where you can see pictures of cars driving through the carved out trunks, those are the sequoias. They're related. They're basically the same tree, but because they grow in different terrains, they have a whole different structure. So those are the largest trees in the world in width, are the sequoias. They probably will only grow up to be like 300 feet tall, which is still very tall. But the redwood trees, they won't grow that wide, but they are the tallest tree in the world. Tallest on record, I think, is 370 feet. And they say they can be like a lot taller than that too. It's like 400 feet. Pretty cool. We don't have that tall of redwoods here because they are still very young, but they're probably in that 200-foot range. Definitely in the 150 to 200 year range, but they can be thousands of years old. So I think below the surface, they're probably thousands of years old. But like I said, this forest, very young trees. There is an area in Big Sur where there's said to be 2,500-year-old redwood trees, and that sits on the top of McWay Falls, which is a gorgeous spot. You just go down the highway about 20 minutes, and it's connected to Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park, which they say Julia Pfeiffer is who protected that area of the redwoods, so that's why we have that old growth there. Definitely recommend checking that out if you have some time to just explore Big Sur. But yeah, I like to just come down here and just show people this area because you could totally pass it up and not even realize it. But feel free to explore a little bit more. There is a little bit of like a hidden path that we don't take because it's very steep, but it does take you down to the campgrounds, and you could find your way back up. I would usually go down this and then make a loop where we saw that sign and that divide in the trail there. All right.